We are live, so we can start.
Shall we start?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So, good evening, all. We are back with another great talk, which is Remapping Navigation. I'm Tanishka. I'm the lead at DSC VIT Pune. Okay.
Yeah. So, hello, and welcome back to another exciting virtual tour of EMBARK. I am Atharva Dongre, the management head of DSC VIT Pune, and the host for today as well. Today with us, we have Mr. Alain Chautard. Mr. Alain, after having a successful career in full-stack development using Java, decided to focus on Angular in the year of 2011. He helps development teams learn and become fluent with Angular through training, mentoring, code reviews, and consulting at his very own website called angulartraining.com. He has published several video courses on Angular, which helps tech enthusiasts like us to become an expert in Angular. Also, he's an international conference speaker. He is the organizer of Google Developer Group chapter in his hometown of, of Sacramento, California. Apart from being fabulous at Angular and mentoring, Alan loves traveling, soccer, reading, and photography. Today's session will be split up into main parts. In the first part, we will cover interesting features of both Google Maps and Google Maps JavaScript API. These would be illustrated with real-life examples. You'll learn how to add data to map, get distance information, geocode data, and use more advanced features as well. In the second half, this would be a bit more action-packed, as we'd be developing an application which would be using these features which we learn. And the best part being Mr. Alan would be guiding us with the project. Mr. Alan, personally, I was very excited to have you here and host this event.
Thank you.
Going through your profile, we had a number of questions, and I'll be addressing the few as well. First being, why did you choose to move into Angular after having such a wonderful career in Java?
So that's a very good question. I started working with Angular mostly because I decided to create my own company and work on my own rather than having a day job. And when I started working on my own projects, having my own clients and all of that, two things were very important for me. The first thing was I needed to be very productive, so I could work for more clients and get more things done. And Angular allowed me to do that. Well, when doing web development, Angular is really great to get things done really quickly. So that was a very, very important thing for me. And that's why I got into Angular a lot more. And the other thing is when I became self-employed, most of the work I was doing was very visual. So I've built a lot of things with Google Maps. I've built a lot of web applications. All of them work in the browser. And as a result, implementing them with Angular made perfect sense because it was a way to make things happen faster and really to be able to showcase all of these skills using Google Maps and Angular. So that's the main reason why I got started with Angular and slowly moved away from Java.
Okay. And yeah, you mentioned web development and framework like Angular being a more suitable framework. Mm-hmm. So we nowadays have a huge number of frameworks available for us, be it React, Angular, Ionic, Vue, Node.
Yeah, so there's a lot of options.
How will you help us choose?
So if I have to choose a framework right now, the first thing to know is that whether you go with React, Angular, or Vue, they are very much the same thing. They allow you to do the exact same thing. And basically, if you know one of them, you know the three of them. That's really it. It's all about building web components. And once you know one of these frameworks, you can easily switch to another one and learn the other one. So the decision to go with one or another is important, but you can switch later on. It's not like I'm going to go with Angular and that's all I'm going to know. No, you could you could switch to React later. You could learn all three in parallel if you want to. What I see in the industry is that most big companies that have hundreds, thousands of developers that have been working with Java or .NET for years, they usually go with Angular because Angular is using TypeScript. It is object-oriented. From a syntax perspective, it's just more natural for them to get into Angular. Whereas, on the other hand, when I see startups or small companies or people who are just more familiar with JavaScript, they'd rather go with React because it's a little bit more tiny. It's closer to JavaScript. It requires less setup. You don't really have to have classes or object-oriented patterns. So React is more popular with smaller companies or startups, and Angular is more popular with enterprise, big corporations, banks, government, all of that. So yeah, basically depending on the career you want to have, React is you're gonna be more likely to work for a startup or a small company, and Angular is gonna open you the doors to bigger corporations, governments, those sort of things. So that could be one thing to be aware of when you decide which one you want to go with, basically.
Okay, and just adding to this question a bit, I would like to know, while doing short projects, how can we choose which framework would be suitable?
So if you want to work on something very small, React or Vue is probably a very good option because it doesn't require a lot of setup and it's super easy to get started and code right away. Whereas with Angular, it's a little bit more complex to do something simple. Angular was really designed for big applications, things like, well, Gmail, Google Calendar, anything that really requires a lot of code. So I would say if you want to do a small, quick thing, React or Vue are going to be better candidates.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Alan. It was a great clarification and a lot of my doubts got cleared up. So Tanishka, shall we begin with the talk?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, right. So, first of all, I would just like to thank Alain for really coming up because he's based at California, and despite of the 12.5-hour difference, he's here with us. And I must say that the motto of DSC, when I approached him, I told him the same, that our aim is to bridge theory and practice. And so that today we shall have both theory and practice on a topic which we think is very easy to work on, but I'm pretty sure if you all stay till the very end, I'm sure you're going to have a complete different view of the world. I mean, why not? You're going to learn different techniques of playing around with Google Maps, and that too from a Google developer expert in Google Maps. And I must say, he's just an amazing speaker because I've been through his Angular videos of NG conferences and they were amazing. So yes, the stage is on you. You can continue. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to get started with the talk then. So we are going to get started with Angular itself. Not Angular, Google Maps. These are my two main topics. So in this talk, we're going to do an intro of all of the different things we can build with Google Maps. We're going to take a look at the different features that are available, and basically from the very basics to some of the slightly more advanced features. Because one of the very good things about Google Maps is that it is actually super easy to get started with it. And you can start building stuff with not a lot of code at all. So why this talk? Well, Google Maps is extremely popular, right? Lots of people use Google Maps. It is growing day after day. There's always more data into it. The maps are always improved. There's tons of features in Google Maps. Yet, there are not too many developers working with it. And that's mostly because maps seem to be complex. Right? When I talk to people about Google Maps, they think, oh, wow, that must be so difficult to do. The code should be very complex and all of that. But actually, what we're going to see today is that the Google Maps API is not difficult at all. It is really not that difficult to get started and write some code with maps. And it's also very, it's a lot of fun to work with maps because you can see your result right away. It is on a map. It is basically using this infrastructure, this design of maps that Google has, and we add our own features, our own layers of information on top of it. So it looks great, it is useful, and it is pretty easy to get up and running. So just a couple of words about me. We already talked about myself a bit. Just wanted to add that, as mentioned, I'm based in California, so it is early morning in here. Which is why I probably look a little bit tired, but that's okay. So my name is Alain. You can just call me Al. I'm the organizer of the Angular meetup group in Sacramento, California, as well as the Google Developer Group Sacramento, which is another type of Google group, just like the student club that you are part of. I'm also a Google developer expert in Angular, Google Maps, and web technologies. And what I do for a living these days is I do consulting about 60% of the time. So that's helping teams get started with Angular, with web development. And the rest of the time, about 40% of the time, I do technical training. So my website is angulartraining.com. And that's where I teach Angular, JavaScript, TypeScript, Google Maps, to companies and developers who want to get started with all of that. So I do video courses, on-site courses, blog posts, conference talks, and meetups like this one. So in the past, I've been working with Angular with Google Maps quite a bit, and I've built a lot of different applications. So these are some examples of things that I've built around Google Maps. So as you can see, it can be very, very diverse. We have a heat map at the top right corner of the screen. In the middle, this is a store locator. So it was a Facebook app, actually. It was a Facebook web page that was built to find stores in Australia for a specific brand. And on the left-hand side, we have a real estate application. So that was used to map and render the different properties in a city and see which ones are for sale, which one have yet to be built, and all of that. So three very different applications, three very different things that were built with Google Maps. So when we work with Google Maps, what do we do, right? What are some examples of things that we can build with maps? Usually we are going to add some layers of data and features to an existing map. So we're going to add some things on top of the map, really. As you saw on my previous slides, it's all about adding some info on top of the map layer, whether it's a satellite view or a street view of the map. So these features that we add could be markers, polygons, filters for the information that gets displayed, and all of that. So a store locator, real estate website, travel websites. There's tons of examples that are using Google Maps these days. And here I have a short video. So that's another app that I built a few years ago. And this one, not sure if it's going to work here. So it's basically like Uber. It's a way to order a pickup, but not for people. This was for a waste, for trash. So it was a company in London that wanted me to create this app so their clients could book a trash pickup to get their trash thrown away and picked up by a truck. So that's another example of application built all around Google Maps, because the map was really everything on here. That's where you would choose your location, confirm the pickup, and enter a date, and all of that. So lots of different features, lots of different things can be done with maps. So let's take a look at some code now. You probably want to see, how do we do that? How do we make things happen? So we are going to go to that link. So this is on the Google Maps documentation, which, by the way, is great. There are tons of examples here. You'd be able, you can basically learn Google Maps just by going through all of these examples and see what is being done here. So this is a simple map, right? So it just shows a map in Australia and the code behind it. So it is really just HTML and JavaScript. From an HTML perspective, the web page is nice and easy. We have to do two things on that web page. The first one is include the Google Maps JavaScript. So this script here is including the Google Maps API. So that's a very long pass. And in order to do so, you're going to have to use the API key. And that's because if you use Google Maps a lot, if you have, let's say, tens of thousands, millions of users, at some point you might be using features that you will have to pay for to use. If you have lots of volume, you're going to have to pay Google to use the maps. But I've never had to pay for anything. So it is free for, as long as you don't have millions of people using it, you're not going to pay anything. Still, you need an API key that has to be provided in here. So that's something that you can create on your Google account. If I scroll up, there is this Go to Console button. That would go to my Google account console where I can create those keys and then use them in that script. When we work on our project later, I'm going to give you my key. So you're going to have an example of key included in the code, so you don't have to worry about that. I make it easy for you. So that's the first step. We include that script. Then on the web page, we have a div. So that's where the map is going to show up. It's basically a section of the screen where we want to render the map. And from an HTML perspective, that's all we need. We need to include that script. We need a place to render the map, and done. Then, if I move to the JavaScript code, you'll see that we have a function, initMap, which is called by the Maps API. So that's when we include the script here, you see that there's a callback, initMap. So that's the name of the function that Google Maps is going to call when it is ready to load. So we define that function in JavaScript. And all we do in that function is create a map. So create a new Google Maps map. We specify that this map is going to go in the div that has the ID map. So that's a place where it's going to go in the HTML. And we specify then the center of the map with the latitude and the longitude and the zoom level that we want to have for that map. So Google Maps has zoom levels from 1 to 20. So 1 being zoomed out a lot, so you're kind of super far away in space, and 20 is super close, that's like street level. And so here the zoom level is 8, which is kind of in between. We see several cities, and if we increase that number, then it would be closer to the city of Sydney and then down to the street level. So these 3 lines of code, that's what renders the map up here. So pretty easy, right? Not much needed to get that map on the screen. Just 3 lines of JavaScript, which could be just 1, by the way. It is just written in a way that uses several lines of code here. And then you get a map. So nice, straightforward way to build it. And as I'm here, I just want to show you that for all of these examples, they have a link up here to open a JS Fiddle link. And when we click on it, it goes to a live version of that code. So this is probably a little bit tiny on my screen. I'm going to make it bigger. Now I can change the code live. So let's say I make the zoom 15 down here, and then I'm going to run it again. You'll see that the map is going to refresh and is now a lot more zoomed in, probably a little bit too much. Let's make this 12. Try again, and still a little bit too much. Let's make it 10. Yeah, now we can see a little bit more here. So testing it is really tweaking these numbers, hitting the run button, and you can see your result live down here, which is really nice. So for all of these examples, they have a link right there that you can use to go see the code and tweak it to change it to whatever you need. So that's the basics. That's how you get started. One script to import in your HTML, a little bit of CSS to size the div in your HTML, 3 lines of JavaScript, and you have something displayed. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, of course, I just showed you how to display a map, but there was nothing on it. So the next thing is, how do we add something to that map? Well, we can add a marker. So if we want to add a marker, which is this very well-known Google Maps marker, you've probably seen it before, right? We're going to add the map as we did before. So we center it on a specific location, and then we add a marker to it. So it's a new Google Maps marker. We specify the position of the marker, so the latitude and longitude, the map on which it goes. So in our case, we have just one map, so it goes there. And we provide a title, here, Hello World, which is going to show up when we go over the marker like I did here. And now we have a marker on the map. So it's really all about creating objects that we add to the map and then they render.
Okay.
The icons can be changed for these markers because the Google marker by itself is good. But if we want to customize it, so here they are using little flags, for instance. In that case, we would have to pass a custom image. So here, an image is created. We provide the size information for that image, the origin, the anchor point, and then we get it rendered. So when we create our marker, we pass that image as a parameter to it. So it is slightly more complex in terms of code, as you can see when we add a custom marker, especially in that example, because they provided the size and everything. You could go with just a URL for the marker, and then it would render at that location.
Okay.
So adding data on the map is good, but it's even better if we make it interactive, right? We want to be able to click on that map and see some extra info or have some features associated to events. So of course, Google Maps support that. And the main feature that comes with the API is the notion of info window. So an info window is something that looks like this. When you click on the marker, you have this bubble that shows up, and you can put some text or any HTML in it. So here, we still create our map with the Google Maps object. We create some HTML. That's going to be the content of the info window. We create an info window with that content in it. And what is going to, we create the marker, and then we add an event listener on the marker. So very similar to what you would do in regular JavaScript in the browser. Marker.addListener click, and on that click, we are going to do info window.open. So it's going to open on our map and at the location of our marker. So this is what is going to make the click render the info window like this. So you can see that the Google Maps API is super easy to use, right? It's really all about creating objects with simple constructors, passing some configuration to them, and then we get them rendered on the screen.
Yeah.
So one of the things that this requires is you need the latitude and longitude of the places that you want to display. So the question you might have is, how do I get the latitude and longitude, right? So let's go to Google Maps, and I'll show you an easy way to do that. So I go to maps.google.com. It is showing me a Google map. And if I want to get the latitude and longitude of, let's say, this school here, I can just do a right click on it. And when I do a right click, I can, there is an option that says what's here. When I click the what's here button, you can see at the bottom of my screen that the latitude and longitude show up. If I click on those, they get even bigger, so they get displayed right there. And now I can use that latitude, longitude. I could copy paste it and then use it and render it on a map. So that's the easiest way I know to get the latitude and the longitude. You go to the map, right click, what's here, and you get that info. Now that I have that latitude and longitude, I could use it in my example here and replace those two with the one that I just copy pasted. That I'm going to hit the run button, and yeah, now that's where I am right now, close to Sacramento, and the map is the area where I live. So just by changing the latitude, longitude that I got from Google Maps, I was able to update all of that.
That's great.
So Google Maps is all about, we talked about the API and how to do things in JavaScript, but Google Maps itself, when we go to the web app, has a lot of features. And it's important to know that those features, for the most part, are still available when you add your own layer of information on top of the map. So one of them, for instance, is the 3D view. So let's see if I can get that one to render. Also, for some reason, I don't see the button. Oh, I have to put satellite first. Yeah. So when you switch to the satellite view, then you can click on 3D down here. And when you do 3D, the map tilts a little bit. And then if I zoom in, you can see that all of these homes now show up in 3 dimensions. Now, I have to give you a warning about this. This works very well in the United States because they have tons of data, satellite data, and all of that. But in other countries, the coverage is not that good. If you go to Europe or India, I'm not sure if you get all of that precision, and I'm not sure you have all of that data. But here in the United States, you can see that it's really great. I can see that 3D view, I can turn around. It's just cool. And if I had my own markers on that map, they would show up here as well. So I can still have my own layers of stuff on top of it and play with the 3D view, and it would still be visible. So it's a lot of features that we get really for free, I would say. That's a pretty nice thing. And another similar feature. So again, it's not coding, but still it's a very interesting thing to be aware of. So you probably know Street View in Google Maps, which allows us to go to the street and see what is going on here.
Yeah.
One feature that is not very well known in here is that you can also travel back in time. So if I go to the top left of my screen here, I can select this drop down, and I can go back in the past and see what this looked like in 2015, for instance. And then I get a view of Google Maps in that street in 2015, and there's an even older one in 2014, which in that case, we don't see much of a difference, but yeah, you can go back in the past.
That's really great.
Getting a street from the past, which is great. So these are cool tips that I wanted to show you because it's always impressive, and especially where I live, I can see how things looked like, let's say 5, 6, 10 years ago, which is which is pretty nice to explore.
Yeah.
So back to some code. What's important to know is that when we use the Google Maps API, when we use that JavaScript, we are not using maps.google.com. We're not using the Google Maps website, right? These are two separate things. Using the Maps API, we're basically getting the data from Google Maps, and we are embedding it on our own website. An example for this would be this website here, which is going to display real estate info. So that's if you want to buy or rent a house. You can see that they use Google Maps on the side with some custom styling. They had their own layer of data to display all of the different houses. They have the info windows when we go over to display some extra info. So this is really nice Google Maps work done with the API to display boundaries and houses and all of that. So some features that we saw are specific to maps.google.com, meaning the Google Maps website that you're familiar with, but they're not always available when we build our own map, or at least not yet. So Street View is there. If I build my own map, I'm going to have Street View. If I do satellite, I think we're going to get the 3D as well. Let's see if I can zoom in here. One of these cities, and I'm not sure. In Australia, it doesn't seem to be showing up the 3D view. So it really depends on the location and whatever's available there.
Okay.
And if you want to learn everything about the Google Maps API, there's this reference where they have all of the different objects that we can put on the map. So if you want to add shapes, polygons, image overlays, if you want to draw things on the map, you can draw lines and circles and all of that. All of the documentation is here in the Maps JavaScript API reference. So that's basically next to the samples that I showed you earlier. We have the code samples right there. We have the reference right next to it with all of the documentation for all of these objects.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. We having all the documentation in one place.
Yeah. I never have to go to any other website when I work with Google Maps. Everything is here. So that's really very helpful. So with the API, we have services to display things on the map, of course, but we also have extra services that are very helpful, such as geocoding, for instance. So geocoding is the idea of you have an address, you want to turn it into a latitude and longitude. There's a geocoding API for that. You can also do the opposite, and from a latitude, longitude, get an address. So there are also APIs to do that with Google Maps. The Places API is all about getting info about places. So businesses, parks, hospitals, all of that. You can use the Places API to say, hey, Google, in that area, in that city, can you give me all of the hospitals? Can you give me all of the restaurants? Can you give me all of the anything you want, basically? And it's going to return all of those places with the latitude, longitude, and all of that. There's a direction API where you can say, hey, I want to go from A to B. Can you give me the directions to do that? And they also have a distance matrix, which is a way to say, I'm here, I want to get the distance to all of these different locations. Can you give me that? And then it would give you all of the distances between all of these different places. So lots of really cool stuff that is in the API and that you can use from JavaScript directly. So we're going to start practicing shortly. I just want to introduce one last thing before we do so, and that's the ability to draw shapes on the map.
Wow.
So we can draw pretty much anything we want on a map. We can draw squares, lines, polygons, circles, rectangles, any of that. It is possible to do so. I'm trying to look for something visual here. So here they create a polygon, and you basically provide all of the coordinates of that triangle. So here they provide all of these coordinates. That's a Bermuda Triangle. They provide the color for the stroke. So the border of that triangle is going to be red in that case. It's going to have an opacity of 80%. The stroke is going to be 3 pixels wide. It's going to be filled in red as well. The fill color is red, but the fill opacity is going to be 35%. Now, if we look at that one, let's open it. You'll see the triangle showing up on the map with all of those settings in place. There we go. That's a big red triangle.
Wow, that's really great actually, to edit things and create shapes on the maps as you can work live.
Yeah. And I can add a click event. I can add event listeners on that triangle. So if we click on it or if we mouse over it, we can add some interactions to it as well. And yeah, that's really the code to add that triangle. So we create a polygon, pass the coordinates, put it on the map, and that's done. So pretty straightforward, right? There's not thousands of lines of code to do it. It's just config.
Simple
basically.
API doing all the work behind the back end.
Yeah, exactly. The really tough work was done by Google for us. the complex JavaScript is on their side, not ours, which is good. It makes our life easy.
Yeah.
We can draw on the map. So they have a drawing manager as well, which we can take a quick look at. Oh, looks like this one is broken. But that's really a way to do this and draw things, draw shapes on the map, change their color, and then you can save that if you want to. So this drawing manager comes from Google Maps as well. You can use it to draw shapes, anything you want on a map.
Wow.
Drawing, styling. Styling is another big feature that people use a lot with maps. So that's a way to really add any colors that you want to Google Maps. So you can remove all of the labels, change the colors, change whatever gets displayed. All of that can be customized. And so here there's tons of examples of different styles you could be using. So you can see some of them look good. Some of them are kind of weird. This one is surprising, for instance. But yeah, it's all customizable. You can really turn the map into anything you want. You can change the fonts, the info that's going to show up, and all of that. And they have a wizard here that helps with it, how they move it to a different place. But yeah, there's a tool in Google Maps that you can use to say, okay, I don't want to see the roads. I just want to see the mountains. I don't want to see the cities. I just want to see the parks. And you can customize what is going to be rendered and how. All right.
That's awesome. So
now we can start with our exercise. I'm sure everyone wants to start practicing with maps. So we're going to do that. Yeah. So the idea of the small project we're going to work on is we want to create a map that is going to display the closest COVID-19 testing centers. Because while that's something that we're all going through right now, COVID-19 has been impacting the world. A lot of people have been trying to help with it. And I thought, hey, this could be a good project to work on with maps, right? What if we created a map where we display the COVID-19 testing centers, and we would center that map on the user location. So that way, when you load the map, it's going to show where you are right now. And then we're going to highlight those testing centers and show which ones are the closest to our location. So if you want to get started with that, here's the link, the GitHub link, where you can get the starter code. So in that code, I provided an index HTML and a basic script to load the map, right? So you can use that to have the basic map displayed. And so let's click on that URL. This is a GitHub repository. And the other thing we have in that in that repo is some instructions. So I provided a JSON file that has some testing centers in Pune, in India. So that's, it's actually showing it on the map automatically, which is nice. I didn't know you could do that. It is actually a JSON file like this, where I provide the coordinates of these testing centers. But GitHub was smart enough to create a map and display it with those locations. So I only added 5 of them. The idea is we're going to use that, display it on our own map. And to show which one is the closest to you, we are going to add a circle around that, around every single testing center with a 1 kilometer radius. So you can know if you are within 1 kilometer close to that testing center. So that's our goal. We want to display a map centered on your location. We want to render all of those testing centers and have a circle with a 1 kilometer radius around each testing center. So how does that sound? Easy, complex?
It sounds exciting.
It's actually,
it's also
forward. We can do that with 20-ish lines of code, so not too bad.
That's amazing. Such a great project in just 20 lines of code. That's really impressive.
Yeah. So if you guys want to get started, I'll let you work on that. So this project, so the default code looks like this. I provided the index HTML. In that index HTML, I also gave my own API key. That way you don't have to create one. And the basic app.js is going to create the map and add a marker on it. And I also got the geo coordinates of Pune, latitude, longitude, and I put a marker at that location. So you already have an example of how to render a marker in that code.
Okay, Alan, just one thing. Can you share a link of the GitHub repo here so that we can post it in the YouTube comment section or description?
Sure. I'm gonna put it right there, and then you can share it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Alan, so that everyone would have the access to it and everyone would be on the same page as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to get to that code, of course. So in order to run the code, it is just an index HTML. So you can open a browser, and in that browser, just put the file in here. So you can drag and drop the index HTML into the browser, and that would render it right away. No need for a server or anything, just a basic index HTML displayed in a browser is going to work.
Okay. Yeah.
So the very first goal of the project is to center the map on the user's current location. And this feature can actually be done without Google Maps. We can get the user location from the browser itself. So if you Google browser get current location, for instance, you'll see that there's an HTML geolocation API. So there is a geolocation API in the browser, and it is supported by basically all of them at this point. So it's on a navigator object. There's a navigator.geolocation, and it can be used in the following way. So you can call a function get current position in JavaScript directly. So navigator.geolocation.get current position. This would ask the user, do you want to share your location with this web page? And if the user accepts, then you're going to receive a latitude and a longitude.
Oh. So we are basically giving a privacy feature to the user as well, to
Exactly.
giving out their identity or location.
Exactly. We can make it optional. They don't have to accept. If they say no, then we're just not going to use their location. So if I take that example of code here and go to the project, so I'm going to code it live. So you'll see the solution being built step by step. And of course, you can do it at your own pace as well in the meantime. So my map is initialized. By default, we center it on Pune. And then once this is done, we're going to ask the browser to get the current position of the user. So on success, we pass a callback function that is going to have the user position. Not going to handle any error, because if there's any error, we just don't do anything. Position, making sure I have the right number of parentheses here. Yeah, that should be good. So if we get the user position, we want the map to get centered on that position. So when I have that my map object, I want to be able to center it. So I'm going to go to the Google Maps reference API map class. And if I look for all of the methods available, I can see that there is a set center. So let's click on set center. Suspense, it's loading slowly. Oh, it should be faster than this. Okay, there it is. Set center is down here. And it takes one parameter, which is a lat long object. So I'm going to do that. So take my map and set the center to a specific latitude and longitude. So these are going to come from the position object. The position object, let's see if my IDE can help. Yeah, so position.coordinates.latitude and position.coordinates.longitude. So that should now center the map on my current location if I allow the browser to share it with me. So let's see if this works. So I'm going to take that index.html and open it in my browser. So I go here. I'm going to go to that specific folder. So that's the path to my index.html. I'm opening it. And so by default, you see the map is showing up. It is being centered on Pune. And at the top left corner, it says, hey, this file wants to know your location. I can allow or block. So I'm going to click on allow. And the map is moving to my location. So the center of the map was updated, and it's now where I'm right now. So this works. The geolocation stuff is working.
Okay. That's great, and that was really quick.
Yeah. So one line of code, and you can get the user location and center the map on that location. So that's really nice and easy. So this feature comes from the browser itself, and then we just ask our Google Map to get centered on that location. Mm-hmm. So in my case, because I'm not in Pune, I'm going to comment this out so that the map stays in Pune during what I'm coding. So I'm going to comment this out. But in your case, if you're there, you can keep that uncommented, and the map should look like this.
Yeah.
So the next thing we want to do is add our COVID-19 testing centers. We want to add their locations on the map. And I provided that JSON file here that has all of the locations. So what I'm going to do is copy all of those locations. And in my code, I'm going to declare a variable testing centers, and I'm going to assign that object to it. Now, if you're building a real-life application that would go in a website and all of that, you could download this through HTTP. You could make an HTTP request to a server to retrieve those testing centers from a request, from an HTTP request, and get that data. Here, I'm trying to make things a little bit more easier for the project, so I just copy-paste the data into my script right away. And then, so I go back to my initMap function. I'm going to have a loop that is going to go through all of the testing centers. And for each testing center, we are going to display a marker, right? So let's say I'm going to create a center marker, not master. That's going to be a new Google Maps marker. And when we create a marker, we've done it up here. We pass an object that has a position, that has a link, a reference to the map, and possibly a title. So I'm going to use that info here. The position is going to be the position of our testing center. If we look at the structure here, so testing centers is an object. All of the centers are actually in the features array. So that's a JavaScript array in which we have multiple objects, and every single object has a geometry property, and that geometry has coordinates. So we have to go into features, geometry, coordinates. And coordinates is an array with, I think it's a longitude first and then the latitude. So it's in reversed order. We'll see that when I get to code it. So let's go down here. So I should really be iterating over testing centers.features because that's the actual array. Then we saw that it's going to be geometry coordinates. Geometry coordinates. It's an array, so the latitude, I believe, is the second item, and the longitude is the first item. So let's see if this works. So this should loop through all of that data, add a new marker for every single testing center. I'm going to set the title to testing center. And yeah, the 5 of them should show up on the map now. Wow. So let's see if that works. I go here, I refresh, and yeah, we do see all of the markers for every single testing center. So I have 5 of them displayed. I actually see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, plus my location. So if we want to make the marker a little bit different, we saw earlier that there is a way to customize the marker and set a custom image to it. They actually have more than that in Google Maps. They also have a way to pass a custom shape. So I'm going to move. I'm going to take a look at that. See if we go to the documentation and look for shape, marker shape. Marker shape references. Yeah, this one looks good. So when we create a marker, we can provide a specific shape for it, which has to be one of several recorded shapes. So they have some that are already provided, like a backward close arrow, backward open arrow, a circle, a forward close arrow, forward open arrow. So I'm going to use one of those just so you can see that we can customize icons and use custom shapes instead. So going back to my marker here, I'm going to add this custom icon. It's going to be a backward closed arrow. I set the scale to 3 and I set a stroke color of blue just to customize it a little bit and see what happens. So let's give it a try. Refreshing here, and there we go. Now my COVID testing centers have this blue arrow being displayed all over the place.
Wow.
So now my map is customized a little bit more, right? The next thing I'm going to do is add a circle. So we want to add a 1 kilometer radius circle on the map. So let's do that. That's our final step. So we've added a marker. Now I'm going to add a circle. So the circle is a specific Google Maps object, Google Maps circle. It's going to have a black stroke color, 80% opacity, 1 pixel weight, and then the background, I picked this blue color, 25% opacity. I put it on my map, and the location for it is going to be the same position as the one we used before. So same latitude, same longitude. And the radius is 1,000 meters. That's 1 kilometer. So this would add a circle around every single location. So let's refresh, and there we go. That's my map.
Wow.
So now, just by looking at it, I can, if I'm right here at that location, I can tell that I have 2 close testing centers, and I can basically choose which one to go to.
Yeah.
It's very visual, very easy to understand. And in terms of code, as you can see, it is not really a lot of complexity, right? If I remove the data, which is 60 lines of code, I only have that init map, so from 65 to 100. So that's 30, 40 lines of code to do that map, right? Which we've done in just 20-ish minutes.
Yes, actually under 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
So that's pretty good.
Considering the like very few lines of code can actually create such a huge impact, this API, like JavaScript API, is really great, and I feel everyone should know this, and how everyone should just add to their skill sets.
Yeah, so all of that can be done in JavaScript. I'm going to check in the solution to the code repo. So there's going to be a solution folder that you can access. It's going to be there in a few seconds. Let's see. Solution, app.js, index.html, map CSS. So yeah, I'm going to push that to the code repo. So that way on GitHub, you can now get the solution and take a look at it if you need help on how to do this. There we go. So I know it's quick. I try to find a simple project that would make sense to do. Still, if you just got started, it's probably like, oh, that was pretty fast. But yeah, we're already at the hour mark, so I had to go pretty quick. So do we switch to the Q&A?
Yes.
We can definitely do that. I saw a few questions in the comments already.
Yeah. So the first question is, what is the future of 3D maps with advent of augmented reality and virtual reality?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And as you can imagine, Google is always trying to stay on top of all of these things. So what they've done in the past couple of years is that they actually have a gaming API now, which is really a way to build games, or at least immersive applications, if you want to, based on Google Maps. So it's really using all of the 3D info, all of the Google Maps data to create your own game or your own immersive experience in Google Maps. So what you can see on my screen right now, these are examples of games and applications that have been built with Google Maps as a support. So you can imagine that once you're there, using virtual reality on top of it is pretty much, this is Street View, right? But in a 3D virtual world based on Google Maps. So if you have Street View on top of that, well, you're basically playing a game in real life, walking in the street and having a virtual reality environment around you. So that's crazy.
That's out of the world. It's like future is now.
And as I say, it basically makes the world your playground, right? You can provide your own layer of gaming, of virtual reality on top of a real map, or on real map information from the real world. This is something pretty new. It was released, I think it was announced a couple of years ago, officially released last year. But yeah, if you want to build something extremely powerful and that's probably going to be very popular, that's a great option. So that's really the future. From my perspective, that's where Google wants to go with that and allow us to build really immersive 3D environments around maps.
So it's like the next question is a bit of a continuation to that. So how can we customize maps and create things such as like Snapchat and Uber? So how can I get my API to do all of these things like Uber and Snapchat does?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. You can add anything you want on top of the map. So in our example, we added basic circles and all of that. We could decide that when we click on those circles, a chat pop-up would show up, and then you would be able to chat with someone at the hospital to say, hey, I want to get tested. What should I do, or anything like this, and ask questions. This is definitely possible. We would just plug some extra HTML on top of it. So yeah, you can integrate with anything you want. So Snapchat, Uber, yeah. The example I showed you with the trash pickup app, that was basically kind of like Uber, but that I built myself on top of Google Maps. So yeah, it is definitely easy to do it.
Sure. And there's another question from here, Shlahoti. So how Google Maps can predict traffic patterns and help us avoid traffic jams? I'd like to add 1 or 2 points more to it.
Yeah.
How can like there's a roadblock? So how can Google Maps just know there's a roadblock?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So the way it is done is that Google is using 2 things to do that. The first thing it is using is that, so when you go to maps.google.com, I'm sure you're familiar with that, you can add a traffic layer, and that traffic is going to show you the current states of things everywhere, right? And you see, so green means traffic is fluid, red means traffic is slowing down, and they have that information in real time. So they're using, some of the data they're using to do that is actually Android phones. So when you have your phone in your car and you're driving, it's going to be able to know the speed of those phones traveling in the cars, and that's going to help them know, is the traffic fluid? Is it just, are you driving at the speed limit, or is it slow? So that's how they have traffic data. That's one of the data sources that they use to know if the traffic is fluid or not. So that's for the live traffic. But they also have the option down here to get the typical traffic. I'm not sure if we see it now on my screen. I'm going to make it so you can see, because there's, oh, come on. So at the very bottom of the map, there is a typical traffic option where I can choose a day of the week, and I can choose a time during the day. And you can see that the map gets updated with the typical traffic at that day in time. So the thing is, Google is keeping track of historical data for every single day, every single hour, every single minute that happened in the past. And from that data, I can get predictions for the future. So if I'm saying, hey, I want to go to this place right now, it's going to use the current data plus the typical traffic data that they have from last week, from yesterday, from 1 month ago, and they're going to use that to guess to the best. Well, it should take 1 hour for you to get there, because usually the traffic is like this in order to get to this place at that point in time. So it's just, they have a huge database where they have all of the traffic info about every single place in the world, which is crazy when you think about it. but they have all of that data, yeah. And it comes partly from our phones when we are sitting in our car and have our phone on. The location of the phone and the speed at which it travels is going to help Google know whether the traffic is moving fast or not.
Okay. And like, it's related to Google Maps and traffic's the next question. So how does Google Maps figure out the fastest route which is available?
So they have algorithms to do that, and those algorithms are part of the API, by the way. So if you're using the Google Maps API, you can ask for the directions. It's going to use that algorithm to define what the best route is, and it's also going to use the traffic info, so which is of course very important. So depending on the traffic, you're going to have a different response. And by the way, when you ask for directions on the website, you can also specify. So let's say I pick, I'm going to pick a specific. Here in the options, I can specify when, route options, distance units. No, that's not here. I don't see it anymore. But there is an option to say, I don't want to go now, I want to go tomorrow or later today. And then it would be able to give you the right directions based on the time of day that you picked.
Wow, that's amazing. That's like scheduling Uber or something for yourself, for your own travel. Yeah. And yeah, the next question is quite a bit of my personal question or issue. So what would be the job market be for web developers in near future, like say 10 or 20 years from today? So what would it be?
That's a very good question. From what I see, there is a lot more demand right now for web development than used to be, let's say, 10 years ago. Because the thing is, 10 years ago, people would say, well, web development is just an extension of a full stack development, right? So we would have full stack people who do everything from start to finish. But as you can tell, these days, front end and web development in itself is huge. There's just so much you can do in the browser with JavaScript. So it has become its own specialty, right? And a full stack developer just cannot keep up with everything there is to know on the web and everything there is to know on the backend side. So from my perspective, front end or web development is growing very quickly because people used to think, we don't need people for that. we are full stack. We can do everything. These days, there's so many different APIs, libraries, versions of JavaScript, and new features that come up every day that you need people to specialize in that, right? So front-end web development is growing, and there's more and more demand for it.
Yeah. And so what do you think the role of AI would be in development of front-end or in general websites?
You say that the role of
AI, would there be a scenario where AI algorithms would be taking over the front-end development part or the back-end development part?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure about that one yet. I don't see any impact, and I don't foresee any for as far as I can tell. So I guess we'll see. I don't really have any answer or prediction for that one. So I would say just wait and see.
And yeah, the last question from my side, from my personal side, would be like we are all curious about the Angular training program you have and the Google Maps like information and to know more about it. So how can we get more insight, or can you just let us know where can we access your course materials and what would be its the syllabus that we'll be covering?
Yep, sure. So on the screen, I'm putting two things now. So the QR code here, that's a link to my slides. So if you want to access those slides, get reference to it, access to them, that's a link to the slide. So if you scan that with your phone, you'll get to the slide presentation. And at the bottom of the screen, there's the link to my website, angulartraining.com. So if you go there, you'll see my video courses. You'll be able to even chat with me. There's a chat option to ask me questions. All of the different services I have, all of the courses available, it's all on that website, including my blog as well, where I post content about once a month. So yeah, these links will give you access to all of it.
Yeah, can you just once again share those links here so that we can actually post them in the comment section?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Angulartraining.com, and for the slides, I can give you the actual link, which is much longer than this. And there we go.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Alain. So to all the viewers right now which are viewing us, please like the video and comment and subscribe. We'll get back to you with all your questions, answering to all your questions. And we'll be having more such live talks as well, and we'll be uploading videos on current technical topics. So make sure you hit the bell icon so that you will be updated about what all we are up to. And thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm sure the audience has enjoyed because I was monitoring the comments and they really loved it. And even I've received personal messages saying that they have really enjoyed the project and they have definitely received a different view of.
Okay, great. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and the API part was really impressive. With a few lines of code, we can have such a major impact on it. Like it's really mind-blowing and mind-boggling.
Yeah, and that's why I love doing these talks, because I wanted to show to people that it's easy to get started with Google Maps. We always imagine, oh, this should be complex or a lot of code, but in the end, as you can see, it is really simple. And you can get really creative with all of that, right? The possibilities are limitless on what we can build with maps, especially when we take a look at the games and stuff that they now enable. It's just crazy. So yeah, if you're creative and want to build something fantastic, then you know how to do it.
Yeah. So
Okay. Yeah,
I'd like to add
it.
one more. Sorry, Alain has his own channel, YouTube channel, I guess, as well. So you can go subscribe him and find more technical videos as well.
Oh, right. Okay then. Thank you.
No
Thank you, Alan.
problem.
Have a good day.
Okay.